Hey, Mike here, producer behind ZERMELO, and in this video, I'm going to introduce you to Guillotine mixing, all right? And I'm going to show you how to set your mixes up in the Guillotine style. Now, Guillotine mixing is the number one thing that completely revolutionized how I mix and took my sound to the next 10x levels. And I hope that it's going to do the same for you. So you're going to have to leave a comment down below and let me know what you think about the style, because I'm sure you're going to have some questions. So definitely leave some comments. Now, before we dive into the video, I do want to give a shout out to my course, the ZERMELO mixing course, which is a much deeper dive into Guillotine mixing. So check that out. I got a link down below this video. Or consider becoming a member of the ZERMELO Inner Circle, where you'll get access to the ZERMELO mixing course, plus all my production and mixing courses, and you'll get unlimited feedback on your music whenever you want, all right? So check those out when you're ready, but let's go ahead and check out the Guillotine style. Here we go. Now, the Guillotine style is just kind of my silly name for it. It's the where you mix at, or where you produce or mix, just the Guillotine style. You produce or mix at mastering level. Okay, you mix in, you produce, you mix into a limiter. There's no headroom. That's why I call it Guillotine style, because you're chopping off the headroom. But as opposed to the traditional way of gain staging, which is working more conservatively, like -6, -10, making sure you're not getting up to the mastering level. So totally different approaches. But I love the Guillotine style because it's just a perfectly accurate comparison back and forth between your track and a reference track. A reference track is mastered. And so why not just kind of work kind of at the mastered level, so you could just hear, okay, back and forth what needs to be done. So let me just play you really quick the track that I'm working on. I'm in the production stages, so I wanted to show you how this works in the production stages. And the thing I want you to take away from this video is that the Guillotine style is so simple. The last thing that I want to do is confuse you. And I understand why there could be some confusion, because most of the time you hear about the traditional style of gain staging where you work at lower levels, okay? And so when someone tells you about a new way of approaching gain staging in a track, you just have to kind of learn something new and technical. It's kind of a pain. But what I want to tell you is that it could not be simpler. It's so direct. It's so simple. So I want to show you how I set it up, even from the very first thing that I do. From the very start of a track, I go right into the Guillotine mode. Okay, so let me play you what I'm working on, because I've been working on this for about an hour. I figured this would be a fun thing to show you, because kind of off-the-cuff Guillotine. And then we'll just bounce back and forth between my track and the reference track, just showing you you can get really close to the reference even when you just started a track, and then it just kind of keeps on going from there. Okay, so here's mine track, and then we'll hop over to the reference, which is Clooney's track, The Siggy. But here is me. Here we go. Okay, so that was kind of the back and forth, but I hope that you can hear that it's very similar, right? Like in terms of vibe, in terms of loudness, my track is a little bit louder than the Siggy track, but that's okay. But let's go ahead and start kind of checking out the technical things. How do we set up Guillotine style? Because again, it's so easy. Then how do we get it to compare with the reference? How do we check the two and stuff like that? So the very first thing that has to be done if you're working in the Guillotine style mixing is to put a limiter on the master. And you don't do anything. Okay, this is Waves L2. This is what I always use when I'm producing and mixing. When I get into mastering, which is, we're going to look at this when we get to the mastering videos. But in mastering, what I'll do is I will start to swap out different limiters to see which one gives me the most loudness and the most transparentness. Usually it's going to be L2 versus Pro L2 from FabFilter, Ozone's Maximizer, And I also like the Kazrog K clip, which is a clipper, not necessarily a limiter. But those are the 4 that I'll typically kind of cycle through to see which one just gives me the most in the most transparent way, or even an aggressive way. I'm just looking for the limiter that I like the most, but that's way down in mastering. When I'm producing and mixing, I'm always mixing into L2. Producing and mixing into L2. But the point here is this is step 1 of guillotine mixing. Make sure the master has a limiter on it and it's just sitting there at 0, doing nothing. Okay. Step number 2 is all I need to do is get the kick in the right level. That's it. Okay. Those are literally the only 2 steps that I need to do to set up guillotine style mixing. So here's the kick. Let me play it for you. Okay, so if I hop onto the kick channel, you'll see that this is literally just a sample, just a 909 sample. And then here is a limiter. And the limiter I'm using just to turn up the volume. You can turn up the volume here in the drum rack or in Simpler right here with the volume. But I like to use the limiter because sometimes I'll like to drive the sound into the limiter just a little bit. And let's see if we're doing that here at all. So I'm getting 0.1 decibels of gain reduction. So basically nothing. And then another thing that I tell people to do, there's a couple different ways you can set the kick when you're doing this. You could just set it at full headroom, which is exactly what I'm doing. So since I'm getting 0.1 decibels of gain reduction here on the limiter, then that means that the kick is hitting full headroom. It's hitting at 0, right? Just a little bit over 0, and the limiter's chopping the rest off. But this is a full headroom kick, so it's taking up the full headroom. Another way you could set the kick is in the spectrum analyzer. So typically, I'll recommend putting the what's it called, the fundamental frequency of the kick around -6 in the spectrum analyzer, and you can see it's right around -6. Okay, and so those are literally the only 2 technical steps I need to do, and you can imagine how much time they take me. 0. Because number 1, well, that's not necessarily true, but almost 0, because my template loads with L2. So I don't need to do anything there. And my template is literally just having this mastering chain on it. And it's not even a mastering chain. It's just an analysis chain. It's just having this analysis chain on it with L2 at the beginning. And then the only thing that takes me time, which doesn't take any time at all, is just running through the kick samples, choosing a kick sample that could work. You can see I have a lot here. So I'll choose my kick sample kind of as I go, as I come up with the bass line, as I get different drum parts. I'll kind of cycle through different kicks over time a little bit just to find the right one. I found this one. The only thing I need to do is just get it to the right level. And so in this case, the only technical thing I really need to do was moving the limiter here down to -5.2. Okay, it could be a different value for any other kick. So step number 1 is put the limiter 0 threshold on the master. And step number two is just set the kick at the right level, either full headroom if that's what you want, or by -6 in the spectrum analyzer, or you can see what the reference is doing. So if we hop over to the Siggy track, let's see what they're doing. Okay, so if I hop over to the master now, let's see what their kick's doing. So the kick is sitting right there. Okay, so almost full headroom, almost, just barely below it, right? So if I hop over to mine now, you see that my low end is identical to their low end. Okay, so this is the tail. Okay, it creeps up a little bit faster than mine. Mine has a little bit more of a spike further down the line, but very similar in terms of level for the low end. You can see that the low end of my kick is right there, same spot. The only thing that's really going over would be the little transient that I have here on the kick, but that's it. Okay, so those are the two things. Is step number one, make sure that limiter's in place. Step number two, set the kick at the level it needs to be, either by any of the ways that we referenced. But those are the only two steps, and everything else is going to fall into place after you do that, because the kick is the anchor in your mix, in your production, in everything for a dance track. And so the only thing I have to do is set the volumes of the sounds that I put into the production at a good spot relative to that kick. So I don't have to be technical. I just have to put the bass approximately where I think it sounds good as I listen to my track. And then, of course, I could bounce over to the reference track, listen to what their bass is doing, bounce over to mine and be like, you know what, maybe I can make it a little bit louder, or maybe I need to turn it down a little bit. But it's nothing technical. It's just since I'm so close in level to the reference track, it's very easy to tell what whether I need to turn sounds up, whether I need to turn sounds down, and all that stuff. So in the very beginning, you don't need to be technical. The only technical things is getting that limiter on the master and putting the kick in the right spot. Everything else just kind of follows as you mix, as you're kind of producing and mixing as you go, and as you compare with the reference. Now, of course, what we can do, and that's one of the benefits of the guillotine style, is simply getting a result immediately when you start. I've been working on this track for about an hour, and you could hear that it's pretty close, even within 1 hour of working on it. So let me just play that again really quick. Pretty close, right? Again, my track is a little bit louder. And that's the benefit, number one, of the guillotine style, is that even on the feel level, when you're just kind of vibing with your track, you can get your track feeling good right from the beginning. And that is so critical, because then you're not like, God, my track sounds like crap, right? You can get it sounding good right from the get-go, and it's very easy to do that. The second benefit of the guillotine style is the technical analysis. It allows you to be as precise as you could possibly want to be. And you kind of saw that as I got the kick level very, very, very close to the Siggy kick level, okay? But we can get even deeper. So let's see. Let's just check out number one, the loudness comparison between the Siggy track and my track. Now, very important is to make sure that the limiter here is right at 0. Okay, because if I crush the limiter here, if I start pulling the limiter down, then that's obviously going to also pull up the level of Siggy, right? Or the level of the reference track. You can see now the Siggy track is causing gain reduction on the limiter. Okay, but that's why it's always at 0. And you only need to leave it at 0, because as long as the kick is in the right spot, right, and just approximately the right spot, then when you mix everything else, it's just going to work out, okay? It's just going to work out, and you won't need to worry about this. When I'm looking at the limiter, if I get around -4 to -6 decibels of gain reduction as I'm producing, as I'm mixing, that's the sweet spot. If I get over 6 up to -8, then I know there's something a little bit wrong. That's kind of too much of a frequency spike. I'm sorry, that's too much of a level spike. And then I know that maybe I should fix something. But when I'm producing, I'm not worried about that. As long as I get the kick right and get all the relative levels kind of around the kick feeling right, then that's kind of what I care about in the beginning. Later on, when I'm mixing, that's when I'll start paying attention to the detail. Oh, we have 8 decibels of gain reduction on the limiter. I need to kind of fix something that could come from the bass and the open hat playing together on the offbeat, causing a level spike. That could come from the clap and the kick playing together, causing a level spike. And so what I might need to do is either gut the clap, take out some of the low end, saturate the clap to get the perceived loudness, but lower the technical loudness so that I don't get as much of a level spike here, because that will weaken the kick if we have too much of a level spike sometimes, or too much gain reduction. But I'm getting very technical right now, and I don't need to be. So what we're doing now, though, is I'm just telling you that we need to have the threshold at 0, because that's the key. If you have the threshold at 0, then the reference can run right through it, and it won't affect the reference at all, because the limiter is only going to activate when it receives a signal above the threshold, and in this case, above the threshold is 0 dB. But since the Siggy track is already mastered, it's not going to go above 0 dB. So this limiter is going to have 0 effect on the reference track. Okay, it is going to have an effect on my track, because my track is not yet mastered. I mean, it's going through a very simple mastering chain through this limiter, which is just a limiter. Okay, but that's the key, is that when I run my track through the limiter here, it's basically turning it into a master. It's basically turning it into the reference track. And so that means that down the line, as I pull on these analyzers, I'm basically analyzing 2 masters. I'm analyzing the master of the Siggy track, and I'm analyzing the master, or the crude master, of my track. Okay, but that's why the guillotine style mixing allows you to be technically precise, because all these analyzers here are going to help me compare at a very precise technical level the differences between my track and the reference track. But it's very key that the threshold here on the limiter is 0. Okay, so that's number one. So the first thing we'll kind of look at here, and remember, we're looking at the technical benefits of guillotine style mixing. And so what we could do here is let's check out the level, the LUFS values between the reference versus mine. So here is the Siggy track. So around negative 7.7, we'll just say 7.5 just to round up. And so let's check out mine. Okay, so we're around negative 6. So we're about a dB louder than the Siggy track, and you can hear that. But the thing is that here on the master, I'm only getting about negative 4 decibels of gain reduction. So to me, this is awesome because the track is loud, but I'm not crushing it in the limiter. I'm not getting 10 dBs of gain reduction. I'm not getting 8 dBs of gain reduction. I'm getting 4, and negative 4 to negative 6 typically is the sweet spot. So this makes me happy because then I know I'm going to get a loud mix, and I've only been working on this track for about an hour. So I know that because of the Guillotine style lets me figure all this out. But again, I'm not really thinking about that at this stage. I'm only thinking about it out loud right now because I'm making this video. But it just works out that way. Because again, the benefits of the Guillotine style. So now we just analyzed the levels. Let's look at some of the other things. Let's look at the frequency spectrum, for example. Okay, so let's check out the Siggy track and see where they're sitting with the low end and the top end. Frame in the mix, in other words. So negative 6, right? Almost always. This is the same thing over and over. Okay, so they're sitting, you can see this interesting little spike on the hi-hat, very bright right here around 9K, sitting around negative 37. I'm looking at the kind of the average value here. Okay, hop over to my track. I have a 909 hat in here, so it's going to be a little bit bigger, more towards the 7K. But so we can see negative 6 and around negative 37-ish. So here we are just above negative 6, and here we are at 7K, which is standard for the 909 style hats, 6.5, 7K, and we're around negative 35. So that's a little bit loud, actually. We're around negative, just looking at the average value, actually, we're kind of around negative 36, negative 37. So that just means later on, if I want to, I could turn down the hat just a little bit. But as I listen, I don't hear anything really harsh, so I'm not worried about that. But again, we're just comparing, and this is a benefit of the Guillotine style, is I can make this is perfectly accurate. It's perfectly accurate comparison because I'm comparing two masters. I'm comparing the master of the reference track, and this is the spectral distribution, you could say, of the curve of the mastered reference. And then I'm looking at a crude master of my track. And you can see the frequency spectrums are dead on, right? And so next is, and I'm not bragging, it's just when you just set the, when you set the levels relative to the kick, it just works out this way because you know what it should sound like. And then you could jump over to the reference to hear what it should sound like, and then you just place things accordingly. And so again, you can get things sounding good very quickly from the beginning because of the Guillotine style. And then finally, let's check out the high pass, low pass check, the reference trick. So if we come over to the high pass first, here we are, and let's get the LFO tool. So we are now looking at the waveform of the, what's it called? The high end. Here we go. Really quick, here on the LFO tool, I need to adjust the phase because you can see the clap is a little bit delayed. I think that's because I have a certain plugin that's causing this, what's it called, the sample delay. Okay, cool. And so all that is you can see here's the phase, and by default, I load the phase at 360. From 360 degrees, I just start bringing down the phase, and it's going to start moving the waveform so I can line it up so that it's much easier to see. And I think it was 99. See, so now the hat is on the offbeat, the clap's right on the beat, so that is very easy to read. So let's hop over to the Siggy track. Here we go. Okay, cool. So we can see that the hat, 909 style hat, is right here. A little bit of a spike there, but then, so we're kind of around -4 here with the snap up to 16 and just clicking down 4 little ticks, 1, 2, 3, 4. And then the open hat kind of hits up here around -1 sometimes. So if we hop over to our track, so 1, 2, 3, 4. So our clap's a little bit louder. and we're hitting around -1 also with our open hat, okay? And so spot on, right? And then we hop over and we'll do the low pass reference. So we'll check out now the low pass, the low frequencies of the Siggy track. So we can see the kick is hitting around -2 here, right there. And the bass, the body of the bass is around -3, just under -3. So if we hop over to our track, my track, so we're hitting exactly at -2, and Siggy was right at -3-ish on the bass, and we're right at -3. So you can see, like, it's dead on. And this is really the first time I've been looking at the analyzers since working on this track, because again, the only thing I need to do is make sure that limiter's on the master, and then step 2 was getting the kick at the right level. All the other levels are going to be set relative to that kick. It's just going to be based on feel. What do I feel needs to happen as I listen to my track? And then as I compare it to the reference, what's the reference telling me to do? And then I just set the levels accordingly. And again, it makes it very quick to get your track to sound close or within the vicinity of the reference track. Okay, so that's just number 1, the feel benefit, just going by feel, just feeling out the vibe, setting the right levels, because you're anchoring the kick, you're anchoring the mix or the production with a kick, and then you just set everything relative to the kick. The kick you're positioning at the level it's going to be at the master, and so everything else is just going to be kind of positioned around that, and it's just going to work out. And then that's just the very simple benefit of the Guillotine style. Just makes it very easy to get your track quickly up to the level of the reference track in terms of quality, in terms of loudness. And then finally, the technical benefits of just being able to analyze things at the smallest detail, the smallest technical detail, looking at the level, the relative level of the kick and the bass in the low end below 100 hertz, looking at the level of the hi-hat, the clap with the high-pass filter, looking at the spectrum analyzer, just extremely detailed. But that is not something I would be concerned about at this stage of making a track. I just wanted to show you how Guillotine style doesn't only work in mixing, it starts actually in the production. And it makes mixing very easy, because within 30 minutes to an hour, you can get your track sounding just as full, just as big, very quickly to the reference track. So I hope that was super helpful, and I hope your mind was blown. That would be cool. And I'm sure you've got some questions. All right, so go ahead and leave a comment down below with any questions you got. I'll jump in there and answer them as soon as I can. All right. Now, again, if you want to learn more, if you want to dive deeper into this and take your mixes to the next level, check out the ZERMELO mixing course. I got a link down below this video, and or consider becoming a member of the ZERMELO Inner Circle. All right. You'll get access to all my production and mixing courses. Plus, you'll get unlimited feedback on your music. So check those out when you're ready. And thanks for watching. I'll see you in the next video. Peace.